right, well, welcome back to the 532nd episode of Ply and the Professor. This week we have an esteemed guest, once again, esteemed. Known worldwide for his brilliance in philosophy and wisdom of teaching.
Excellent.
Anyway, it's Placebo, or Hunter. His real name is Hunter Johnson, or Mr. Johnson, as his students call him. Yeah, Placebo. Go ahead. I will call him Placebo because that is how I know him in my mind, and it is impossible for me to change now. But tell us a little something about yourself, man.
Sure. I'm from Florida. I went to UF, got a bachelor's in philosophy, went to FSU, got a master's in philosophy. Decided that higher education made me actually really unhappy to be in that little career. So I elected to go a step, you could say, down. And I looked for high school teaching positions, found one, Sanford, Florida. So I don't want to say in charge, but I do a heavy amount of social studies teaching for Holy Cross Lutheran Academy in Sanford, Florida.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
that's cool, man.
And he also, for a little while, though, this is kind of he kind of like was the head of their like esports thing they were doing.
That's a whole nother. Yeah. So, but just before I started there, they had me go to a conference, right? My first teaching conference. And there was a competition for gaming, right? League of Legends. They had a competition. And if you won it, you would get they said a $10,000 reward, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I went to the principal. I was like, look, dude, I can win this, right? Because everyone else that I'm going up against, no disrespect, but they're 45, 50 years old, and I'm 27 at the time.
Yeah.
And I've played League of Legends. There's no contest here if I don't want there to be a contest. Do you want me to win it? And realistically, he said, well, of course I want you to win it. 10 grand is 10 grand.
Mm-hmm.
But the 10 grand was like them doing their thing for 6 months. And then we would have to supply the 10 grand to them after that to keep them. And it was like, well, our school's not going to do that.
Yeah.
So then it's now on me to sort of facilitate. So I won a contest, gave myself more work. Right, is really what it was, right?
Well, at least you won.
I did.
That's what matters. Yeah.
And you ingratiated yourself with your future employer, and
it must have been a good look, right? It must have been a.
Yeah. I like it.
But yeah, I've known Placebo for how long have I known you? 10 years?
More, I think.
More than 10, more than a decade.
How did you guys meet?
Video games. Lord of the Rings Online, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Lord of the Rings Online into Diablo 3.
Oh, yeah. The best Diablo. Nice.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's awesome. That's how me and Preach met. I don't know if you know this, but we met on Facebook Gaming. So we were both streaming at the time.
That sounds right. Yes.
Yeah. And
when Preach and I had our kerfuffle.
Yeah. Me and Placebo had a kerfuffle. And then I went into streaming to drown my sorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And the adulation of the many to make up for the heartbreak of the one special one.
The one, yeah.
The one. That's funny. Lord of the Rings and then the one.
The one. That's right.
Yeah, that Lord of the Rings.
He's really. Sorry, I was just saying the reason we're going to talk about like kind of like a broad philosophical concept, and I know that he knows his stuff when it comes to that, and he would be able to give us some like theories and stuff. He'd just be a good person to have. To give us his perspective and also just kind of keep us on an accurate trajectory as we talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think he's a great guest to have on. Not even a good guest, a great guest to have on.
I'm so flattered.
The credentials are unbelievable, and I'm ready to find out. I heard this train wreck guy causing all sorts of drama online.
Yep.
This guy who created Kick over here to
That's what he always does.
Hey, listen, smart capitalism at its finest, but he created some type of issue, and Preach, take it away. I'm curious to hear about this thing.
So it was actually last night is when I was watching it, or this morning, I guess, and because we were going to talk about, and we're still going to talk about some other things, but it got to me so much. And he's on there gambling, but when he gambles, he likes to sometimes just like, he is very fond of himself. I don't know anybody else who's like that around here, but
not one. Not one. Right?
Not one. Nobody. As a matter of fact, I think that applies
not
pretty
two?
heavily to all three of us.
Not two? Not
Yeah.
I was
three?
like, I'm pretty sure that could accurately apply to all three of us if I'm really being.
Yep.
Hey, there you go. But so anyway, he likes to like wax philosophical sometimes, but when he does it, he comes across as like I am 100% correct, right? Anyway, he started going on somebody. I can't remember what started him down this rant, but he started ranting about how like everybody's slaves, and he especially started like I'll kind of get a little bit broader, but I know one very specific point he got into was like, if you choose to get married and have children, you are enslaving yourself. And it's just society has convinced you that that's something you should want, but you actually aren't as happy as if you would not do that and just lived for yourself and did whatever you wanted whenever you wanted. So that is one point of contention I had, but he also kind of went a little broader in that he kept saying like, why do we work and why do we do the thing? He was almost saying like, everybody should be trying to just live for them, like live for the immediate experience of enjoyment. And he kind of, it's weird. He will go off on capitalism and be like, oh, capitalist, the system, but he's pro-capitalism, which is weird, but he's like, he loves to complain about it and say, billionaires all the reason they want us to be families and feel like we're supposed to work and support a family is so that they can take in all the money and so we're all the only reason we want to work and support a family is because we've been convinced by billionaires in the system to do it. And then there was like, he also kind of went like existentially, and he was saying like death is the ultimate slavery or the ultimate cage, because like you can't get out of it, you have to die.
It's a very secular view.
Yeah, well, no, he's very like basically. He also said if there were like aliens that this is basically his take. If there were aliens that created us, then they did so with the intent of making us slaves, and like the reason we don't realize we're slaves is because we've been convinced that we're not slaves or something. He kept doing like the easiest way to make people stay in a prison is to convince them that they're not in a prison. He kept making that quote. I think there's a quote from somebody, but he kept using it over and over again. I would also like to add in a layer that with Trey, part of me that got frustrated is he is on stream previously admitted to heavy cocaine use, using Adderall like at levels that are supposed to kill you. He was like, no, the amount I was taking should kill you. And he's gotten completely off of those since, but like it was doing so I don't know if you know this, but Adderall will cause you to see a shadow person. Almost everybody who's heavily on it, they were actually talking about it in his stream. They had multiple people that were using Adderall, and they're like, oh yeah, did you see the shadow man? And he's like, oh yeah, all the time. Like I would have to go check and see if somebody was like walking down the hallway, because out of your peripheral you will see what is very clearly like in your peripheral a outline of a person when you're on Adderall at a consistent level, especially if I think if you're taking it for performance enhancement and not some sort of need based. I don't know, but I do know they're all like, oh yeah, we had that. Oh yeah, everybody has that. Like as if that is like just a common side effect of taking Adderall. So you have to use it to the point where your brain starts like hallucinating. And I mean, he was on a bunch. I mean, basically every drug you could, because again, you got to think he is do whatever you want to do to feel good, to have, he doesn't really have a long-term, there's no eternal perspective. Everything you do is now. And so, until he got to the point where he realized he was like losing a part of himself, he was very heavily on drugs. So I do think that has had some impact. I mean, he kind of always sounds like he's a hippie being like, man, the stars are after his brother. Have you ever thought about, the twinkles get into our brains? He does have a little bit of that to him, but he was bringing up a very interesting argument, because a lot of people were kind of agreeing with him or completely disagreeing with him, but doing it was a weird position to take. But it was interesting because it was on the stream and he was talking about how streamers are fake, and the only way I don't know, he did try to like attach it to streaming, which is what made me think we could use it but I don't, it wasn't connective enough for me to process it or to be able to use it.
Well, let's unpack it one thing at a time. Right?
Yeah, there's a ton there.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that was So I mean, let's move the Axl Rose theory of he did enough drugs to create Welcome to Destruction, or Welcome to the Jungle, because Axl always said if he didn't do all those drugs, he never would have wrote that album, right? So we'll put that to the side for a second. But go ahead, Placebo. Where do you want to start with what Preach just said? The marriage, the work.
I mean, so yeah, the marriage is a classic example of this. I actually, so I didn't know what we were going to talk about before we got started, and after hearing Preacher talk about, I was like,
that's why I tried to be detailed.
This is
yeah, because I have thoughts on it too. As soon as, so this is great. Go ahead.
So I'll do what I'm here for, right? The philosophical view that came to my mind initially was from Immanuel Kant, right? The leading deontologist, right? Ethical theory, right? So I think, in fact, a lot of people think that the goal of life is to pursue one's various desires as they come to them, right? Like, you are successful and you are good if, all of the hot people you see, you have as sexual options, right? Things like that, right? As the desires appear, you fulfill them, and that's, wish fulfillment theory. Kant took it a different route, said, well, no. And I think the negative connotation with the word slavery is actually doing quite a bit of work here for what you say about how people are agreeing with him in this take. So I actually subscribe to this idea that Kant proposed that was, well, if you are merely fulfilling your desires as they come to you, well, then you are merely a slave to those desires as they come in, right? It's not enlightened to be pursuing these things. Really what you need are rules, are sort of barriers around what you can do, right? Sort of the rational mind needs to put them in place so that then you can decide between the various options as you construct them. And that's freedom. So in a sense, freedom is you have to conquer those desires and not be a slave to them, which is almost the opposite, it sounds like, of what your streamer guy here was saying. Right? So now, marriage is a specific example. I don't know if I would point to that as a reasonably good one of those options. I know a lot of people would, right? I know Jordan Peterson really is advertising that quite heavily, while others are advertising against it right now. But I think that's merely one example of you need to set the rational foundation and not be subject to the desires as they come in. So I would totally disagree with him, as I suspect the three of us all will.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like when it comes to marriage itself, I think it depends on the marriage. Number one, a good marriage, it's purposeful, and I think purpose. Yeah. When you have purpose, this slavery argument goes out the window. To conquer your desires, like you had said. If people just live by their desires, the world's not going to function. Society's not going to go away. Like you have to think outside. This country wasn't created for everybody. Like freedom is not just free. Not free to go down the street and kill my neighbor because he parked in my spot because I have a desire to do that. So like true freedom is doing what's good and what's right and rising above a lot of those things that I'm sure Trainwreck was. I have to look up his quote or look up his to get complete context on what he was saying. But marriage itself, a lot of people, I think it's in our DNA. I think it's in our soul to create. You don't have all the, like for me, having children, having my son, having my daughter, opened up a whole new dynamic of knowledge and wisdom. I hope to how I perceive God to love Jesus, like God to love the Son. I wouldn't understand how God loves the Son if I didn't have my son and daughter, and how the stories, so to speak, of him getting angry with human beings or for the things that we do, but still loving us. I scream at my son if he goes to play in traffic, but I still love him.
Can I poke you? Sure. I have a wonder here, right? So I've thought a lot about how like the human mind can abstract, right? We can think outside of ourselves.
Sure.
I get really unhappy with a lot of arguments that are like, oh well, because you're a man, your opinion on abortion shouldn't matter because you. But I think, well, I can fathom, right? I can
Yes.
outside myself abstract.
Sure.
Do you think having a child is something like the fulfillment, the that sort of thing? Is that something one could abstract to, or is that something that one could? Because when I look into the future of my life, I have many things that I desire, but most of the things that I don't have are all behind this one door that I think is
Hmm.
marriage, kids, that sort of a thing.
Sure.
And I guess I'm wondering if I'm actually. I realize I don't want to make this all about me. This is your
No,
podcast, but
no,
I want
no,
to poke
no.
you for knowledge here because I desire it.
I would also
Sure.
add in that he talked about that. He was said people who I wish, oh my gosh, I wish I recorded more of that. Like it struck me at the moment. I was like, I want to talk about this, but he did talk about people who say, wow, I view things differently now that I have children. He almost somehow manipulated that into a proof of what he was saying. Like, oh, that proves that you're not thinking for yourself or that you aren't capable of, it's like you've had to brainwash yourself into believing if they changed what you were thinking, then you weren't actually thinking clearly in the first place. Kind of almost an argument, I guess, is how I was trying to figure out how to summarize it, but that's kind of it. It was almost like the fact that having a child can change your perspective means that your perspective was incorrect in the first place. Which I don't know if that's necessary. I mean, I don't know, but he was somehow saying that proved his point. Again, I'm trying to restructure what was a
Yeah.
somewhat scattered, repetitive, like, while he's doing gambling and drugs and he wasn't doing drugs, but from a drug-riddled mind. Anyway, so I also want Ply to answer this because that was directly something he spoke to as like, oh, people. He almost looked down on people who said, oh, once you have children, it will open your mind and you can more adequately understand this. Because I know Nick Mercer said that before. He said, oh man, the way I think politically, the way I think, religiously, all this changed once I had my child. I really like it. It completely changed my worldview. And so, yes, Ply, as the only person who has a child, please give us some insight.
So I would say that I would say that
Daddy Dick.
I would say it accentuates. Okay, so I was using God the Father and God the Son as an example of understanding and thinking I understand more what that parable was and what that particular story is trying to teach us about humanity. I believed a lot of these things before I had children inherently anyway, that we speak of. I had that, but it, like any life experience, whether you get married, you get divorced, you have a death of a child, God forbid, you have a car accident, whatever it is. If you have a car accident, maybe you become a more cautious driver, right? So when I became a parent, some of those things some of those desires that we're talking about that I was a slave to, and I'm still a slave to some of them, to be honest, but they tampered down a bit because now I had a responsibility. I don't call it slavery because I think it's an honor to take care of my son and my daughter.
I completely agree, right? Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think it's a duty and an honor to not do all the things I want to do because I sacrifice and love my children. So I see it a little differently than, say, Trainwreck, but it didn't change me like fundamentally, but it did make me more maybe self-aware. I'm trying to explain it the right way. It made me reflect more, slow down more. Is this the right decision? Should I do this? Should I do that? A little more than, yeah, fuck yeah, I want to do that. I'm going to go do that. So, so I don't consider it in any way, shape, or form my children. A marriage, depending on what marriage you get into, that's a whole different ballgame. But the children themselves is what I'm focused on.
I would say marriage conceptually, as opposed, because you're right, like anything, because I mean, you could have children who
it's a contract.
Murder you later in life. Like, yeah, it's like,
yeah,
any element. So I would talk about marriage conceptually because I think you agree, like, far as like how it feels or how it actually works out in real life.
That's slavery.
Could vary.
Yeah, true slaves did not have a choice to be slaves.
Yeah.
You choose to get married. Mm-hmm. So you have to factor that into this whole describing it as slavery thing. You signed that contract. You picked that person. So maybe you need better fucking interviews when you're hiring people. I don't know what to tell you. But there has to be some self-responsibility. No, and don't get me wrong. I'm not talking about you marry somebody and they're abusive and alcoholics. And let's stay down with the 90% of the marriages out there that are just unhappy people, whatever it is. You made that choice, so either make it work or get off the pot, dude. But don't blame. Oh, I'm a slave to this. I'm a slave to that. No, you chose that. So choice is the opposite of slavery. It's the opposite of freedom. That you had the freedom to choose.
How does that work with work? Because I think that he was also kind of getting into, and I think he confused necessity with slavery as well. Because, like, so at some point in time, we have to eat to exist. And we need a home so that we can control the climate enough to exist. And so that almost necessitates work to some degree, right? And he was almost saying like we were created as slaves because we have these needs. But I'm like,
that part is very interesting to me, that we were created as slaves. That's where I think the negative connotation is taking over, because I think that all three of us would agree, I think we were created as servants, right? That's the point, right? And I guess I wouldn't view that in the same negative light that the word slavery has, right? I would actually, I don't know. I think it's a very human, normal thing to get fulfillment out of being of service to others, right? Which is, I think, where my personal desire for kids or marriage or something like that comes from, is like, well, that is somewhere I could be of service that would enhance these other aspects of my life where I'm not of service. It's amazing the difference between teaching at FSU, where I felt like I was not being of service, and now in high school, right, where it's like, dude, I am a rock to these kids, right? That it's totally different, and it's purely out of service. And I think that an outside third-party viewer could look at it and be like, no, that's slavery, right? But that's an inaccurate assessment, you know?
Yeah, of how you feel. Like, I to piggyback off what you just said, when I do something for someone I really care about, and I see the elicited response, the response, not elicited might be the wrong, but the response from them, that I made their day, or I made them happy, or I helped them overcome something difficult, it makes me feel it makes me feel like I have worth. It makes me feel like I had purpose with them, like I was trying to describe earlier with just the children, but it's with more than just the children. It's as simple as making a cup of coffee for your girlfriend in the morning when she wakes up. It's as simple as, go whatever it is, and then you're of service to them. To give is better than to receive, right? Is the old saying. So I think that is, you're right. I agree with you. That is not, slavery is such a strong term for some of this stuff. Because I don't think
he's
it's black
very
and white.
nihilistic.
Right.
Like, because here's what he was saying is like, even what you were saying is like, oh yeah, but you are doing that. You're brainwashing yourself almost to feel the sense of fulfillment, or like, oh, me being needed is a good thing. He's like, it's just brainwashing.
But we're doing the same thing, right? Instead of using slavery with the negative connotation, now brainwashing is the negative connotation for what we said earlier of conquering one's base desires, right?
Yeah.
We're throwing that negative in there.
Yeah, he's already starting out with doing things for others is inherently a bad thing, and doing things for yourself is inherently a good. Yeah. Which I would almost say, like, a lot of what we consider crime or evil or wickedness comes from a self-centered, it's a lack of control, or doing things like, the reason most people kill somebody is because they emotionally feel something, or they psychologically feel something, and they are trying to get fulfillment, whether that's like a bigger one or just the removal of a painful experience or emotion or whatever. That's why something bad, or the reason you steal from somebody, you're not taking their consideration, you're just trying to get fulfillment of some sort, whether it's whatever. Even if because some people say, oh, I did this for my kids, but it's like, even then you had another way, you could do that another way, and it was just the easier way was to anyway. I don't know, but I do think a lot of like what we do as sins or as crimes or immoral activities stems from a trying to service yourself and get yourself a certain platitude without there being a consideration of others. And because I don't know, I'm trying to work it out as we do.
Totally
Can
I go ahead.
No, just one quick point on that. I do think there's a little bit of truth in, you have to take care of yourself in order to take care of others well as well. So I think like if I'm not physically taking care of myself, I'm not doing some hobbies and things that I enjoy, and I'm just in that world of servicing others, and I'm not placating myself there has to be some measure of, all right, I'm gonna play video games for an hour and then I'm gonna go make dinner for everybody. Like, it's not just I'm gonna play video games for 10 hours because that's what I want to do. But if you never get to play the video game and you never get a little to take care of yourself and your desires at some level, then it will feel like slavery. It will feel like indentured servitude if that's all you do is you're at the behest of others' requests and others' needs. So I don't know if it's black or white with what Trainwreck was trying to say. I think there's a balance there. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's just the way I feel. But I think you have to kind of do some things for yourself, and you take care of your own soul, nurture your soul too, and then from there you will be better equipped to take care of others.
I think that's absolutely true.
Okay.
I think
what about the like priority of operations there?
Yeah, so good. Yeah.
Okay,
So that's where because
yeah.
I think you're supposed to take care of yourself, but I don't know if you make yourself the priority. Like, because I'm thinking, okay, so obviously I'm going to be thinking scripturally, and it usually is like consider others first and then consider yourself. It's not don't consider yourself. It's just, because again, what you're saying is that's true. You cannot be helpful to others if you're so worn down and broken that you aren't taking care of, like if you don't take care of yourself.
You can't
but I don't know.
Don't have.
Yes,
right?
exactly. Yeah. But of course, so here's another question I have. So I'll throw it out there. So there's the story of the widow's mite, right? Or the mite as in not like but as in it was a currency of the time. And right, and it was a parable told by Jesus, right? Where they were giving to the church. And there was a widow who only had like basically the equivalent of 2 pennies, 2 mites. And so Jesus went, and then all these like rich people were like making fun of her, like, oh, look how little she's giving. And then Jesus was like, no, the point is that like she was giving of what she was giving so much of what she had, and her goal was like she was trusting God with it, and like, but it was like a selfless act is the point. That it was her focus wasn't on being super wealthy, but also it was like she gave first and then was gonna like I guess this is getting a little too much into theology, because I would say it established into like she believed God would replace it and God would take care of her if she gave to God, because he was saying all these rich guys gave way more money to the church and way more, and they did not please God. Yeah, they didn't please God as much as she did, because they first made sure they were taken care of, that they had money, that they were happy, that they all did, and then they just gave of the excess. And he was like, that doesn't please God. Giving of excess, because you're not giving credit where credit's due, and you're pretending like it's yours in the first place, and your focus is on you first. And he was like, that doesn't please God. This widow who was giving of even what she didn't have pleases more. And so I'm curious as how that works on a like again, I guess I'm just bringing it back to where it's not necessarily you don't take care of yourself, but I don't know that if our focus is always us first and then everybody else and then others, if that is the proper, it's like there has to be a balance. And I don't know, because I don't think it's either or. That is another thing. I think there was some sort of a false, Train did kind of put almost an either or scenario into this whole thing, that
absolutes.
You either are doing the one or the other.
Speaking
it's like,
in absolutes, which
yeah,
is bullshit.
and you have to do a little
Most
bit of both.
Absolutes are false. Like that's why you can't say I'm in court, right? He never did this or she never does that. That's the first way to get into an argument with somebody. You always blah blah blah. No, I don't always, because last week I did do the dishes. Don't tell me I never do the dishes. Like, that's stupid, because your brain will immediately go to, well, I did it a month ago.
The one time, yeah.
So go ahead, Placebo.
This is absolutely a false dichotomy, right? I think you're absolutely nailing that. For what it's worth, Kant, who I referenced earlier, actually makes the same false dichotomy the other way. So if you are doing something good for your child and it makes you feel good, you didn't do a moral thing. It's only when you did it out of duty, out of your moral obligation, right? And I think that's crazy too. Right? I think that's equally crazy on the other side. I have a really abnormal ethical view, which is that I think actually the right thing for all of us to do is what makes us happy to the highest degree. But I just think God has structured the world in such a way that what makes us happy to the highest degree really is helping other people or making other people happy or being of service to others,
By design.
right?
So you're
Exactly.
saying the people who disagree with it, it's just because they don't understand, like
They don't understand, like your
how happy
example
they
of the
could be
murderer.
if they lived.
Exactly, right.
Okay, got you.
Within the example of the murderer who thinks, oh, I need to be out of this painful situation, right? They don't understand that it is by being of service that they would actually get more value out of it. So they take that little half step because they don't have the vision or perhaps the
And we're taking it
ethical
like
knowledge.
people who
right?
are intellectual, like or mentally have
Yeah, I have
issues
no
that
idea
psychologically or
how to.
emotionally, like they
Right.
can't.
I have
Like,
no idea
yeah.
how to. I
So we're
would
just
say
talking
they're
about
still
normal
doing the
people.
wrong thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't know how I would get it through to them to
Yeah.
see. But it's hard enough with perfectly functioning people that are just
Yeah,
not
right.
interested. So,
Trust me, I know. I work in retail. I see people
Oh
who
my
think
God,
they're
yeah.
perfectly functioning all day. So I think the problem with Trainwreck's view specifically is he's too black and white with what he is saying. And what makes us human is our ability to be rational and to take these thoughts abstract, to put together the pieces and say, no, not everything is black and white. The sun comes up, the sun goes down. That's black and white. We know that. There's certain specific rules to the universe that are black and
Unless
white.
there's eclipse.
Well, yeah, but, okay, but
You
like
know, I mean-
gravity is there.
Yeah.
There's air
I get what
to
you're saying,
breathe.
yeah.
That stuff's black and white. But this stuff that we're talking about being enslaved to, there are. But like when he talks about work being slavery, if you think of it that way, yeah,
It does
but
become it.
it
Right?
becomes it. But if you don't think of it that way, then you number one, in the United States of America, you're free to enter and exit the workforce as you see fit. So, true slaves were not free to enter and exit a workforce, and they were not paid anything for their. So to me, when I hear slavery, I'm thinking 1860, like the horrible, slavery to this day, Middle East, wherever else it's going on.
Puta Kinte. That kind of stuff. Yeah.
Like that's true black and white slavery, so to speak. That is. No, I'm just being honest. It's what it is.
No, you said black and white. I thought it was funny. I was like, oh, well,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, technically, that's true.
Yeah, no, that we know what those skunks did to those people. Like,
Yeah.
that's true slavery. But to go to work to a 9 to 5 because you work at a coffee shop and you don't like working at a coffee shop, you're not enslaved. You're enslaved in the moment because of the choices you made to be in this particular spot. But if you change your frame of mind and say, this is temporary, I'm making $15 an hour doing this, but at night I'm going to go home and work on my painting career, or at night I'm going to go home, or whatever I'm going to do. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to save up a little bit of money, go to school. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And eventually I'm going to earn my way to what I really want to do that doesn't feel like indentured servitude. So a lot of those... That's the frame of mind. Like, I'm never going to quit. I have purpose. I have a drive to do these things. So those people to me who say that, those people to me who say I'm a slave to this job. I'm a slave to this. I'm saying, you chose to be that, which means you're doing that on purpose. You got to change your frame of mind where, no, I'm not going to be here forever. I'm going to put together a plan. I'm going to get out of this. And if it takes 6 months, it takes 15 years.
What would you think of them maybe changing their frame of mind to not say I'm going to get out of this situation, but changing their frame of mind about the situation, right? Like,
sure.
That also,
yeah. Like, I don't like doing the espressos in the morning, so I'm going to be the manager of this coffee shop. So I'm going to do the absolute best I can, show up every single day, be very respectful to the customers, be very respectful to my change your frame of mind. I'm going to be the best barista there is in this place.
So I worked in the Publix deli for like a year.
Yeah.
And before I did FSU stuff, and I hated life at FSU. But even in the deli, I was like, this is enjoy. I knew the guy that came in every day, said 2 chicken tenders. I gave him his food, he left, right? I knew the guy that would come in, be really polite. I'd say, oh no, don't take that. Take this one. This one's fresher, right? And it was just the joy between us. Even though what I was doing, I bet most people would be like, this is slavery. Right, I'm working in a deli. Right?
Yeah,
that's what I was gonna say. I think what you're almost I still think placebo and pliers kind of, because you're still talking about pliers almost like I'm going to get so good that I get out of this. Where you're saying
Yes.
I'm going to change it where I even enjoy work, because I agree.
Right.
There has to be people who do the menial tasks that
Yeah.
are menial. So you have to change your mindset that what you're doing isn't menial. It's a vital part of the person who wakes up and tills the dirt and plays in dirt and milks the cow and gets cow crap on them. They have to be like, I'm doing this for a purpose, even if it's because I'm not disagreeing with either. I just think that there is like some sort of a difference, because like I don't know that anybody is like, I want to work the Publix deli and that is their dream job, but it's necessary, right? Like but it is important. It is like, so I don't know if like.
But you might want to own a deli. It's what I meant. I just meant like when I say get out of this, I meant the current situation and state of mind that you're in. So whatever that plan is, whether it is to move up in a company, whether it is to get a pay raise, whether it is to enjoy your customers more and meet better people or have a better relationship with your whatever it is to make your 9 to 5, so to speak, more enjoyable and fulfilling to you, you got to have some personal responsibility to put together a plan to do those things, and to sit back and just use, point fingers at everybody. I'm going to sound like Rocky Balboa for a second, but to point fingers at everybody and say it's his fault, her fault, this one's fault, society's fault, that's cowardly. That's at some point.
Really phenomenal commencement speech by a guy named David Foster Wallace, who is a bit of a hero of mine, called "This Is Water," right, where he's talking about the value of a higher liberal arts education, right, and I think really it's the value of a good brain, right, a well-reasoning, thinking brain, and he references being at the grocery store and standing in line, and just this chaotic story of day in, day out, the grind that no one loves, right? You can have any job in the world, that grind is going to be there. And the real value of a good brain, right, of a higher, is that in these situations you get to choose what to think about, right? You get to choose how to interpret what's going on. You can treat these horrible situations as not just better than bad, but as sacred, right? Sacred moments. And I think that's absolutely true. The frame of mind that you referenced, Ply, is I think absolutely critical for this stuff.
Well, could this not be taken back to almost the original core of external versus like internal who we're serving? Because you could find satisfaction if you changed your mentality to, I'm going to get pleasure out of serving others, or being an outwardly like, not necessarily not to your own detriment, but changing your mindset of what is good is, if I am helping other people, it would change your mentality of no matter where you're stuck, no matter at what level or what you're doing. If you see it service as a positive, then you would get something out of it. Whereas it doesn't matter. I mean, there's people who commit suicide when they're Hollywood famous, wealthy, get all the, everything they want, both personal life and financial, and they're still not satisfied because it's continuously looking inside, seeing if they're satisfied. And it's an endless pool. You're never going to actually be satisfied by stuff, because there's always more stuff. It is an impossible task. So I think I guess what I'm asking, or what I'm kind of getting at, is perhaps it's almost like it's a lot of religions do this, but I would say a Buddhist are very famous for this, where you are in the moment and you're like, oh, I am, thinking about this for others, and I am not of this world. And because they're very heavy on like neglect or rejecting your, the earthly pleasures, and for the sake of, external. And so I'm wondering if that isn't part of what makes, because let me give you a personal story. We used to know a guy who was very wealthy, but he drove like this beat up station wagon. And it was because a lot of the times what he would spend his money on was helping charities and stuff. And so he didn't spend a lot on himself. And he was very satisfied with that. It didn't keep him from attaining personal status and wealth and stuff, but he didn't care about it. That wasn't the focus. And I think you see a lot of people who do care about it be less successful sometimes. Well, at least not genuine. Like, you can always be corrupt and get in human society, corruption will always provide success. You can always cheat your way and take from others and manipulate others and, cause harm to get your stuff. Like, that's been around since Cain and Abel, right?
But that never ends in greatness. Eventually, truth comes out. Eventually,
Nah, I don't know. I do think people can get away with it. I bet
maybe
we just haven't heard about it. I
Earth.
mean,
well, maybe here.
I mean, yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
But most of the,
I meant on
most
Earth.
of,
Yes, yeah. No,
most of the
taking out
time,
eternity.
most of the time, I can't speak. We're not speaking in absolutes, right? But most of the time, when someone cheats their way and is a skunk and gets to a particular spot, eventually we will see the downfall of that person, like P. Diddy, or someone who's cheated and attained grossly to get to that
I would
level.
say Zuckerberg kind of cheated to get to where he's at. He's same with Gates,
Yeah, but
Bezos. I mean, there's a few of them that
Okay.
really trampled other people, and they're
Sure.
still.
So if we're just measuring on monetary success, then
Yes,
yes,
that's what I'm
That's what I'm
talking about. Yeah.
If
yeah.
we're measuring on their reputation, which is what generally a man runs on, then no. Jeff
You would
Bezos.
hope.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg are not well-liked people around the world.
But no one's ever like completely liked. Like I can't think
No,
of
but
anybody.
I'm just saying, like they're not.
Yeah.
To me, I look at. I don't respect Jeff Bezos. I don't because first and foremost, it's not even because of what the things that Amazon does or like the companies. He cheated on his best. He was married first of all, and then he went and dated his best friend's girl behind their back. His best buddy. He went and now he's marrying this half topless chick who's showing up to inaugurations. That was his best friend's woman. So to me, right, I like his morality caught up with me, and so I'm like, ugh. So this guy, even if he's sending rockets to the moon, if he's doing all these crazy things for society, I don't have a good. I personally do not have a good opinion of him. So to me, he didn't win in my eyes. I don't look up to him. I won't teach my son or my daughter or anybody business lessons from that guy just because of what he did. So his legacy, so to speak, ends in my household when he did that.
But that's because you have certain moral like.
I'm just saying.
I agree, but I think because let's say you become a billionaire, but there'll be a lot of people that are like, oh, Ply said he liked Jesus. That means he's list of hateful things, right? That don't apply, but doesn't matter. And so half the world, half the U.S. will hate you regardless, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't know that we can judge if you're doing good or bad or whatever based off of how society, if they know, like, because I think some people are very fine with, I bet you the people who they surround themselves with in upper echelon, they think of the peons and the people who are up top. A lot of them, I mean, we know that they're very immoral, right? Like, just in general, it's pretty well established.
There's a lot of immorality from top to bottom, but yes.
Yeah, and like the really wicked, creepy stuff goes on, especially at the upper echelons. And so I don't know if they feel the pressure of a Ply or a Preach or a Placebo. Wow, the 3 Ps. I don't know if they feel
the 3 Plamigos.
I don't know if they like. I'm not sure they feel that that like we would feel it if you came on here like, yeah, man, I'm really disappointed and you blah blah blah. I would feel something along those. I would feel something out of that, right? But I don't know that like Jeff Bezos, like he doesn't know we exist. So
he doesn't care. I'm not saying he cares, but
I guess you were talking about reputation, but so his reputation is
when
solid.
He dies, he can't take his wealth, him or her, but I'm just saying him.
Yeah,
they can't take their wealth with them. If they do not have a reputation when they die, if you don't have a good reputation when you die, or if you have a bad reputation when you die, that shit stuck with you. Like your you're not the only one who suffers from it. Like your family will suffer. Eventually, it catches up somehow. Is what I'm saying. Like whether
if you're a selfish person, do you care if your family
it's like someone's gonna pay a debt. Debt doesn't just go away. So whether you're paying the debt or your son or daughter's paying the debt or your grandkids are paying the debt, eventually, that doesn't, being immoral and gross might work in the moment, like cheating on a test in high school, but eventually you're not going to be able to cheat on you're going to get to a test you can't cheat on and you're going to be exposed. Was the way I think of it. So eventually,
what's going on in the workforce now, I think.
Placebo, I had questions for you while we were doing this. I was taking a few notes because no, it's okay. I just was thinking while we were all talking about this. I know you keep referencing, what was that gentleman's name that you...
Immanuel Kant.
Kant. Oh. Okay, so Kant. I kept thinking while we're having this conversation about one of the first philosophy books that I read when I was younger, which is The Virtue of Selfishness by Ayn Rand. So we're talking about taking care of oneself first or not taking care of oneself first. And the other, I just want to know your opinion on Ayn Rand and on The Virtue of Selfishness, which wild philosopher, and Atlas Shrugged kind of changed my life, to be honest with you, but I'm not an Ayn, what do they call him? Randy.
People who like worship her.
Yeah, I'm not that, but I really do respect her work. I thought just coming from communist, like just her whole story and where she's coming from, it was brilliant. So, what is your position on the overarching philosophy of selfishness, as she describes it? And secondly, then we'll get into Tim Grover. I don't know if you know who he is. He is a famous sports trainer who trained Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, and some other guys, and he wrote a book called about winning, and he talks about being a cleaner and how Michael Jordan and Kobe and Tom Brady and certain people have this mentality of whatever it takes, and that they create enemies in their own mind, and very few human beings have this ability to go to that level of sacrifice for their dream or success or victory, and how that applies. Because I want to be a cleaner eventually one day, what he describes as a cleaner. I don't know if I have enough of that in me to get to that level of being a cleaner. So let's start with Ayn Rand.
I have a personal story about that too.
Yeah,
eventually we'll get into that. That's you do first, but there is something that I do. There's a balance to that. There's because I used to be that way when I played sports. Yeah, but the balance
means you're not a cleaner. So that's what I'm saying. So it's just.
I think that's healthy because I think there's an immorality to demonizing other people to give yourself the motivation.
Sure.
You know,
that's the argument. But that's what gets you 6 NBA champions. Yeah,
but it's 7 NBA. Then that's where I would come in. Is like, where's the actual value? Like,
that's
where are we
what creates the
iPhone.
Value? Like, that's what creates Microsoft Windows. Like, there's certain people who do certain things. That's what I was just saying. But I want to start with Ayn Rand because I'm not saying it's moral or immoral. I want to pick Placebo. We have a brilliant guest here.
I agree.
Who's incredible. And I just want to hear your thoughts on Ayn Rand and how her philosophy of selfishness and individualism, right, I guess would be a good term for it, how that could relate to what we're talking about with Trainwreck, talking about slavery and this and that and the other thing, because she kind of always made the argument that if another man takes anything from you, it's theft, right? And you should only give, right? So go ahead. I'm sorry. I'll give you the floor.
Taxation, stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So you've picked a philosopher I only know a little bit about.
That's
right?
what I'm sorry.
No, it's perfectly fine.
Okay.
But so I don't know her philosophy of selfishness.
Okay.
Right? That is new to me. So could you maybe give me a brief rundown? A 2-minute elevator pitch? So
it's almost like what Trainwreck was saying with you should only do things for yourself, like that, to fill those. However, her specific argument was the virtue in selfishness is if you do take care of yourself completely as first and foremost, then you will have the ability and desire to take of your free will to take care of family, and if everybody takes care of themselves like this, then there won't be a need for socialism. There won't be a need for communism. She was making the argument like of total 100% individuality.
So there's an image that comes to my mind that I've always thought about, like, as a young man, like, 5-6 years ago, thinking about what do I want in a woman, right? What do I want in a romantic partner?
Okay.
There's an image that comes to my mind, and this is the sort of picture that I see, right?
Mm-hmm.
My eyes only view what's in front of me, right? I just can't know what's behind me. And so I guess I view it as sort of like the interlocking of arms, right? Where I look forward, they look back, or they look forward and I look back, right? So there's some things that I cannot see, no matter how well I do individually. So I do think that to some degree, I don't think it works fully that way, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think you need other people looking out for you. I really subscribe to the idea that everyone who's ever succeeded has succeeded because someone else looked out for them in
Mm-hmm.
some way, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, that being said, I referenced my ethical view earlier is that a lot of what we should do is for selfish reasons, right? Like the reason that I should be a really good teacher, right, and do really well by these kids and show them what it is to be a man is because if I do that for 5 years, well, suddenly everyone in my community knows me as this great leader, this great communicator, this great facilitator, and all of a sudden I've got all these great men near me that are also willing to be that person interlocking arms with me when I need that.
Mm-hmm.
So I do support a heavy amount of like take care of yourself, right? Like know what's
Yeah.
good with you and lift yourself up. Um, but I guess I wouldn't say fully, right?
Yeah.
I don't know that.
Not black or white.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
exactly.
Rational brain. Yep.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. All right. I was just curious.
And then
I would like
the
to
other
jump in
one
there.
was-
I think Ayn Rand also is coming at it from a perfectly secular perspective.
She was, yeah. Yeah, no, she
Because
was
if you add like certain religious things, I mean, we're all three Christians, so I guess I'll use that a little bit. But I think that does add different elements to how you perceive people or how you would treat or like, or just rather how we are told to structure our desires for us. It's like,
yeah, we have a referee.
I don't
We're
even know
bound by a
if
set
like
of rules.
yeah, because I would say Christians technically
Yeah.
aren't even supposed to do things for themselves. They're supposed to do things for God, right? Like it's supposed
Yeah, give glory
you're,
to.
you're serving God and how He sees people as you should love that. Like that's why you can disagree with someone, think someone is even sinning and doing something wrong, but still love them and want to see the best for them. It's hard for people who don't understand or haven't been in that to understand that. Like that's why I think a lot of confusion about like, yeah, I won't use directs, but you know, where Christians say, I think that's wrong, but I still love you and I would still defend you. It's hard for other people who don't also have that perspective to understand how you like. That's why I think you see people on one particular social side, they almost have a hatred. Like they can't because when you don't agree with them, they almost begin to feel hatred for you. And they don't understand how you could be like, I disagree with this, but I still have a genuine love for you as a human being. And, or if I correct, or if I say, I think this is unhealthy for you, I think this, or for society as a whole, I'm doing it out of a loving position, not because out of a selfish position where I just want to feel the gratification. I'm doing it more broadly than that. It isn't interesting because I do think that does impact how you are supposed to, or how you perceive it, how you're supposed to perceive it. I don't know. I'm just trying. Sorry, it just got. I do think because when I heard Ayn Rand,
I know we all say it different.
Yeah, right.
Yes, God,
Well,
I can't.
here-
Yeah, her name's her. So I do think that should be added to some degree.
So placebo. I know we're all kind of gamers here too. To one thing I would recommend I don't know if you've ever played BioShock.
No, I've never gone down that rabbit hole.
Okay, the first game is a summary basically of Ayn Rand's philosophical work, and Andrew Ryan, who is the antagonist in the game, who creates that underwater city with no government, no religion, no rules, where people can create and do whatever they want. He's basically Ayn Rand.
Gotcha.
And there's a gentleman who leads you through the game, like over the radio. It's a brilliant game, by the way, if you ever get a chance. He's supposed to be John Galt, he kind of plays the John Galt character from Atlas Shrugged, who, if you know the basic premise of Atlas Shrugged, and it's a terribly written novel, by the way, but the philosophical underlyings of it are amazing. But the actual writing, she was not a fiction author at all. But the underwriting of it is the producers of the world, the Steve Jobs, the Elon Musks, everybody, they disappear one day. They just leave. They're like, we're no longer going to be slaves to you guys in society, and you're not just going to continue to take and take and take from us. And they all leave society, and they just disappear. and then all that's left in the United States, and Atlas Shrugged, basically, all that's left is the takers, the politicians, the people who don't create anything, just tax and take and social, and society just starts to crumble and crumble and crumble and crumble as the producers have left.
So I love this. I love that. There's a I think this leads into what you were going to say next about the sort of differing mentalities between people. I forget the guy who you were referencing.
Tim Grover.
The sports. Yeah. There's you ever see The Island with Bear Grylls? Do you know the premise, right? They were wondering, has modern man fallen away from its primal roots, its ability to do things, right? So it took a group of men, left them on an island stranded, right? And they had to do the thing. And what you saw in the first, I only watched the first season, but what you saw was very quickly people either got into one of two groups, the doers or the nappers, right?
Yeah.
Those who went out, hunted a crocodile, killed it, brought it back and ate it, or those that rested on the beach all day and waited for others to bring them their lunch, right? Like, so I find that very interesting.
Which one's more intelligent?
Of producers and takers, right? That's a good question, right? Which one is more intelligent? I don't know.
If you know that you will get, I mean, that's kind of why usually communism and social Marxism in general fails, is because eventually people figure out, oh, I can be a just get by, don't produce, but I'm still guaranteed to get. So I can keep taking without, and that's how it always breaks down, because everybody has to be at maximum production for that type of system to work.
I don't even think that's just in humans. I think that's just in a lot of living things in general. You put milk on a back porch for a cat, and the cat figures out the milk's there every night. Cat will forget how to hunt, an outdoor cat, and it won't feed itself anymore. It'll just come looking for the milk. So I think that's just like genetic, almost, some of it, where if you know that check is going to be in the mail and you don't have to do shit for it, well, then why the hell am I going to go out and work at that coffee shop we were all talking about? If I know the $500 check and I can go work, well, I'm going to go work for $472, or I can get a free check for $434 and have 40 hours of free time. Like,
yeah, but then those people with 40 hours of free time fall into states of severe anxiety and depression.
Correct.
Because
Yes.
guess what? They're not being of service, which
No
is
purpose.
the whole damn point, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. So, but BioShock, if you haven't played it, and the second thing I would say, if you want to get a good summary of Rand herself, she does an amazing interview with Mike Wallace of 60 Minutes back in the day when 60 Minutes was actually a good thing. He interviews her. He goes after her because Mike Wallace was not the most individualistic conservative person even back then, but he's a great interviewer and a great journalist. And it's probably about 15, 20 minutes, if I remember correctly. And she's sitting there, and it's from the 60s. It's in black and white, and she's banging out about...
I love those.
It's like a good Edward R. Murrow, or whatever his name was, Good Night and Good Luck. You know, that kind of how 60 Minutes was born and all that. So it's a young Mike Wallace interviewing Ayn Rand, and he goes after her, and she talks about selfishness. Government taxation is you're stealing, one man stealing while she's smoking this giant cigarette.
I do wonder how people say it's not stealing, right? I think just the same way I wonder how people say abortion isn't murder. It's like, no, I think the question is it justified stealing or justified murder? It should really be the question.
Yeah, and a lot of
I've never understood.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm just, when you watch, I think you'll get a better synopsis of what that I'm trying to explain, because this was 20 years ago. I was studying Rand and trying to figure out my place in the world and where I would fall philosophically as well. And I think she fits in pretty damn well to what Trainwreck was talking about, although he's talking about it from a cocaine Quaalude-filled gambling rant.
Yeah.
You know, like, but I think her particular, and she's one of the, I wish there were more, but I can't. She was the, I think, first, Preach, correct me if I'm wrong, she was the first famous female philosopher, or world famous female philososper
of the modern
era.
era.
She was which is awesome too, that she comes at it strong. She was tough. I'd be scared to be in a room.
Well, I
with
mean, yeah, if you come out of communist
she was
Russia,
tough.
you got it. Like,
Gristle.
You know, yeah, exactly. Gristle is exactly.
She would have been on that island killing that crocodile. She would have made wallets out of those crocodiles and then sold them for coconuts to those lazy bums on the beach. That's what she would have done. So, but her selfishness would have provided food and products for those lazy people laying on the beach. So that's what she would argue. Like, yeah, I want to make money and do my thing, but it's going to make them do things too because they're going to want my products and my services. So, anyway, so just to tie it into video games, because that's where we actually started this, this podcast from. BioShock 2 is all about socialism. So the entire thing is designed around socialism, the second game. And the
whole political series.
It's very brilliant. And they do not take an opinion generally on the philosophy that they inject. They do a really good job of injecting arguments for and against what you're playing and what you're experiencing.
So some of the most fun I've had in the past few years is I'm writing a fantasy series, like a television series, like Game of Thrones, that sort of thing, right? And it's got like 7 sort of nations in it, and basically what I did was I took differing ideologies and I assigned them to each area, right? And the idea behind the series, well, let's just see what would happen if over time this ideology existed, thrived here, and then what happens when it competes with a different one, right? And what happens when that competes with a different one, right? And sort of an honest, let's see where it would go, right? Realistically.
Yeah.
So I love putting these philosophical ideas into media and then seeing how it goes, right?
I think
that's beautiful.
I think it's a lost art form
I
in
want credit
modern
as an editor.
Yeah.
It's famous. I want credit.
When it gets famous, because it sure will.
I think it is a lost art form in today's, for generally speaking, in today's movies and TV and books and things that we lost that. Everybody just takes a hardline stance, obviously.
They throw a conclusion out instead of argument, right?
Yeah.
Instead of good.
Yeah.
It's just, here's the conclusion. You all accept it, right? Don't you agree?
Yeah, and if you don't, you're a skunk. Yeah, that's the way so it's preaching, no pun intended. It's not educating to your position or making critical thinking is never at the forefront at a lot of this new media today, like it was when Ayn Rand wrote Atlas Shrugged, or even what was it? What was the famous conservative Burke? I like Burke. I've read a lot of Edmund Burke. Yeah. And then who just passed away? He created the National Review. Friedman.
Milton
Friedman. Yeah. So Milton would.
I didn't know he just passed away.
I think
that's sad.
I think I could be wrong, so I'm going to have to Google that. But his famous philosophical take was about when you talk about spending money, and he would say, the person who spends your money the best is you. Then it was like a hierarchy on its way down. So if you spend other people's money, and then the worst is other people spending other people's money. Like he did that whole, and it's true. We're seeing it with Doge and things that are going on now, where they're going in seeing all the weird stuff that we've been paying for decades. Comic books in Saudi Arabia and this and all these crazy things because other people spend other people's money unwisely. The most unwise, I would say. Yeah. That is so cool that you're writing a fantasy series.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
I would love it. We would love it to have you back on as that thing gets closer and closer to fruition.
His bitch ass had been writing on it because
Look, man.
Well, no, I'm just saying I would love.
This is a behind the scenes thing. I've been wanting him to write more so I can get because I've been editing it or like reading it and kind of giving little suggestions. Yeah. And I got into it. I'm like, where's the next part of the story?
Yeah, he's George R. Martin to you now. He won't finish Game of Thrones.
Careful there. I am way more attractive, capable, young, good than George R. Martin.
No, I just meant how he won't finish Game of Thrones, and everybody's annoyed that he just won't finish it. So HBO had to awfully finish it in season 8. Like they wrote their own ending to it, and nobody likes their ending.
I can do that.
Yeah,
and he said pee pee poo poo and shouted toward the sky, and that's how I would intentionally though. I would make it one of the most awful like endings ever, just intentionally because I'd be like, Placebo's dead. But he knows this is happening right now. Be my final like little jab at Placebo.
I'm curious. I can't wait until you get closer to having it, ready to go, and you come back on and tell us all about it. And
appreciate it.
I have thoroughly enjoyed talking with you today.
Likewise.
I hope to have you on again. I obviously you're welcome anytime. back on here. Preach, it's been a pleasure. Listen,
Yep.
it's food for thought. I am ready now. I'm going to go dive into some junk food and take care of my selfish needs. That's what I'm going to do. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. We're out of here. Share the show. We love you guys.
We ran out of time. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.